Well, good morning, everybody. Just a quick update as we get started here on Friday morning. I will be taking the website down this weekend. It's getting rebuilt, and I just need some time over the weekend to kind of get things finished up on it. I'll have a new look to start off, but I'm not sure I'm settled on that new look just yet, so I might mess around with it a little bit. But we're going to redesign the web page, and hopefully it's much more user-friendly to you, not only on the web, but also when you're on your mobile device. So just trying to make things a little bit better. One of the tools that will likely be the last one to be put back on the new site will be the site selector tool, where you can pick your location and get your point forecast. It'll take me a little bit of time to rebuild that, but I appreciate your patience and just want to let you know that it's great to know that the website's getting some traction and use. So just that quick announcement. Now let's get into what I want to talk to you about today. First animation we're going to watch here is just the last 24 hours weather stations around the United States that approached or set or tied or broke records in terms of temperatures. And so the blue colors, of course, representing, if you look down here, where we're approaching record lows, and this is record highs. Well, we've had such cool air kind of settling into the Ohio River Valley all the way down into the southeast here and over to the mid-Atlantic. It is important to note that yesterday in Texas, we were, there were several monthly high records that were either tied or broken in Texas, given the exceptional heat that is in that area. And as I was watching the satellite yesterday, it was kind of interesting to note one thing. So this Texas ridge has been in, I think, every forecast video I've talked about for the last several weeks. And we can see the deep convection that surrounds it. So Arizona, in fact, I saw a great picture this morning on Twitter of a haboob. That would be a dust storm generated by the downdraft of one of these big thunderstorms here. But just deep convection throughout the four corner states. We have this deep low that's running up the coast. We have wildfires, large ones in Idaho. We'll talk more about those in a second. And then our stalled out frontal boundary down here to the south. But the storms that caught my attention were actually these right here. And I know you're probably going, well, why in the world did you care? Well, remember, these are all inside of a larger ridge that's sitting and spinning here. And generally speaking, that means we've got high pressure in the interior. We have a lot of suppressing motion in the atmosphere, and it's usually blocked from any really good moisture. But one of the things that can happen when you get tucked inside of a ridge here is you can hit something called the convective temperature. So let me kind of show you what this is. This is from the Storm Prediction Center's website. I went to Dallas-Fort Worth. And if you look at this, so I just clicked on this star right here, which takes me to the weather balloon that was launched last night in Dallas. And it's tracing the temperature and the dew point temperature profile as you go up in the atmosphere. Now, the way the atmosphere works is that when you develop a thunderstorm, that thunderstorm has its own internal environment, okay, which is kind of being compared to its surrounding environment, all right? So it actually acts like a balloon. It's interesting. Those storms behave like balloons, and they're very warm. I know you might think of storms as being cold, but their environments, what surrounds them, is much colder. So what we draw on here is this dashed line, this one right here, and it's called a parcel line. And what it shows us is the temperature, if you could get some air to rise, what its temperature would look like compared to its surrounding. In other words, the storm temperature would follow this line. The environmental temperature around the storm follows that one. And as long as the storm temperature is warmer than the environment, or the parcel temperature is warmer than the environment, you get ascension, you get air that goes up. And what we actually map out for you a lot of times is CAPE, convective available potential energy. And on these diagrams, the area between these two lines is proportional to the energy in the storm. Okay, so there's your quick lesson on this. Now, if you are trying to build a thunderstorm, you have to be able to lift the air to this point right here, where the environmental temperature line becomes less than the parcel line. Okay? Now, there's several ways to do that. You can do it with a front, a mountain, whatever. You just got to trigger the air to rise. You can force it up there. Then once it gets there, boom, it takes off. And that's what often gives you that flat bottom to big thunderstorms. It's right there. But there's another way by which you can do that. The atmosphere can just get so hot at the surface that you end up getting the air to reach what is called its convective temperature. And in this case, we actually plot it. It's 106 degrees Fahrenheit in Dallas. Now, they didn't quite reach that, but in central Texas right here, which we don't have a sounding in central Texas, but we can check some of the nearby ones. See how dry it was way west. Now, this is way over here in the west, but the convective temperatures were 108 degrees. See right down there? And several places surpassed that, meaning we were getting these high-based, very large thunderstorms that popped right in this area, and you can see them as the sun set. Now, comparatively speaking, these were much bigger storms farther away, but it's interesting to see that in the middle of that high pressure air mass with no trigger, we were able to get a complex of storms to form, and they put down a little bit of rain right there. Otherwise, this part of Texas has not measured rain in a very, very long time. So now let's get back to the bigger picture. We had the system that moved through parts of the upper Midwest, the low that's leaving here out of parts of the Canadian Maritimes and up into Maine, the stalled out frontal boundary that did deliver some showers into parts of Alabama. There's our little convective storms. Here are the ones rolling around the ridge, and there's this deep low going up the coast, which is putting down this narrow but quite heavy band of rain in that area, and that's what we've been watching quite carefully. Now, in parts of the West, we're continuing to monitor very large fires. And I want to show you yesterday, just as the sun was setting here, you can really get a good view of where those fires are. So some in California, a few new ones here in Nevada, and then the large fires we've been monitoring for quite some time north of the Snake River Valley, right here in the Payette National Forest and in the Rocky Mountains. A lot of lingering smoke still here in parts of Montana, North and South Dakota. And as the sun sets, it's kind of hard to see, but there are fires in southern Montana and parts of Utah. They're hard to see simply because of the cloud cover over the top. But one other thing to take note of, look at these winds here just ripping over the top of the Willamette Valley, getting up toward like this part of Washington. And that's going to be an important thing to be monitoring for the Pacific Northwest as that deep low continues to spin there. But I want to show you where we currently stand on acres burned. So for active fires right now, 1.863 million acres. I just bring this number up because we have more active fires burning acreage now than we did all of last year to this point. 1.8 was where we were a year ago. So we're currently at 5.426 million acres burned. And you can kind of compare that to the historical passes we've done a few times in these videos. So just want to keep you up to speed on that. From here, I want to take you to the wind field because that ridge that's been parked over Texas, it's still there early this morning. Here's the low trying to leave in parts of the Northeast. We have the flow going over the top of this ridge, but it's got this deep low on the backside, which is going to give us some wind issues here today and also give us just increased chances of rain along the West Coast. We'll take a look at what this trough does here in a few moments. But while we have really no tropical activity to speak of here in the Atlantic or the Caribbean or the Gulf, we are watching 3 different circulations out here in the Pacific. And one of the strongest ones was easily viewed by NASA's MODIS satellite yesterday. We kind of zoom in here and have a close look. Look at the size of this hurricane. I believe to category 3 in strength. I'll have to double check that, but just a beautiful view. Let me move the cursor so you can see it. Very symmetric, which would suggest that the environment around this is very conducive to development, meaning we've got a good humidity profile. We do not have high wind shear, and it opened up a very nice eye yesterday, which we can kind of zoom in here with this high resolution satellite data and see. Well, that particular system's name is Gilma, and it is on its way to the northern side of Hawaii. Now, how strong it will be when it gets here is still something that's we're going to have to try to figure out because it's still several days away from getting to this region. But much closer, we do have another system, and it is going to pass just to the south of Hawaii. And that is why the National Weather Service has already issued tropical storm watches for the Big Island. And it's possible that this jumps up here to hurricane status. Now, at this particular stage, this is going to be something we're going to need to monitor carefully for Hawaii, just given the wind threat and what that might do, and of course, the very, very, very large waves. Now, many that watch my videos, some of them I know they comment every once in a while. They watch it because they want to know what the waves are going to look like so they could surf. So let's go do this real quick. Let's just open a new tab. Let's go to Weatherbell, great website here, maps. Let's go to their wave model, the ECMWF wave model. And let's take this out to the Pacific. Let's just do the Central Pacific. Yeah, that grabs Hawaii. And if we play this forward, no, that's not Hawaii. I'm so sorry. There's Hawaii. If we play this forward, now we can see these waves. Sorry about that. These are the wave heights being projected right now. So as the first system approaches the Big Island, we'll have wave height, significant wave height here. As you can see, this is 16, maybe approaching 20 feet. And then as it goes south, look at the huge waves we're expecting here. So this is probably going to be some pretty incredible surf weather. And here comes Gilma later, a bit farther to the north, maybe not producing quite as exciting surf conditions based off of the current forecast for the waves, but certainly something to be on the lookout for here. Okay, in the Atlantic, there is not a whole lot going on. We continue to see that despite our forecast, my forecast, of seeing more increased activity starting, I was expecting it to start 2 or 3 days from now. The upper level suppression in the Saharan dust is still a problem. We covered that in depth earlier this week. So just wanted to bring up to speed on the tropics here. Even though you do not see tropical development in the in the Gulf, we're going to be talking about some surges of moisture coming from this in a few moments, though. So keep an eye on this region, even though there is no tropical lows currently being forecast to develop there. So let's get back to kind of some bigger picture things. We started with temperatures. I'm going to get back to it just to show you where August has been so far. So these are temperature ranks by climate district. I do a color bar that anything that's on the lower half of the distribution is in the blue range. Anything on the higher half is in the red. So we can see that all of these states in the midsection of the country here have had, on the cooler side of average more often than not in the month of August. Now we know the end of August, right now, starting this weekend, we're going to see the heat that's been in Texas and in the southeast open up. But it is important to note that we've kept that really, really oppressive heat around for much of the south into Florida as well. On the precipitation side of things, we've covered quite a bit this ongoing flash drought scenario, that's in this part of the Mid-South here. And that is an area on our drought monitor that continues to grow. I'm going to show you the drought monitor in a second. But I do want to note one thing. We've been a bit drier in part of the Cornbelt. We've got the Pro Farmer Tour, I think, finishing up now. We've been a bit drier in the central and eastern Cornbelt as well. Better storms have come through parts of the far northwestern Cornbelt. And what you see down here, this is all from, or not all from, but mostly from Debbie. And I did get word earlier this week that the USDA was able to trigger insurance payouts for a huge number of counties down here in the southeast, which is just, that's how the system is supposed to work. So I'm glad to see that occurred. But I mentioned the drought monitor. I'm going to come back to this in just a few seconds, but let's go pull up the latest one. Drought monitor, there it is. And this is where we've seen some expansion. It's continued in this area, and we've also seen it expand in the northwest. So having a look at the change map, let's just go look at the 1 week change map. If you really see this color, there's been a 1 class degradation. If I just choose the last 4 weeks, let's go there, we can now really see where that drought has been spreading in the United States. If we take a look at the actual data for the whole country, that's what you've got here. This goes back to the year 2000. This is the area of the continental United States covered in drought. It's a nice tool. You can just select the end, and I'm going to look at it. And right if we hover over this point, it'll give me some stats. So we're now up to 55% of the lower 48 in some form of drought, D0 to D4. That includes a big category of abnormally dry. You then have 23%, almost 24% in D1 to D4. If you just think about this, back in June, these numbers were half of that. So we've since June doubled our drought numbers. That's what we want to think about here as we go forward in this. Now, I mentioned a moment ago the dryness that's been all around the Mississippi Basin. And earlier this week, I got asked a question, and I may have misspoke about that. The question was about the Mississippi River. And I had said the Mississippi River levels were doing okay. We had, but the Ohio was not a major contributor this year, like it can be if there's a lot of heavy rain here. But there was so much early season, wet conditions here in the north that the river, for most part this summer, stayed in pretty good shape. That was all of this. But apparently over the last few weeks, and this has kind of slipped by my notice, and I apologize for that, but the river levels down at Memphis have dropped, and we're now technically below low stage, right at it almost. Here it is, at Memphis. And so this is just something that we're going to have to continue to stay very well aware of going forward, given that the last 2 falls, we've seen that river drop extremely low. In fact, it is almost where it was a year ago right now. And we need to know if it's going to drop into these ranges down here. And so I got to keep an eye on this forecast very carefully as we go forward. So let's kind of start to dig into that. Early this morning, dense fog north, wind advisories in kind of parts of the Columbia Basin getting back into northeastern parts of of Washington here. Red flag warnings are out for parts of Nevada. And as we come down into south central plains, right here, this bullseye of excessive heat, it's still on. And we're going to continue to deal with those high temperatures. In terms of storms today, they're going to line the Rocky Mountains and come out into the Front Range. That seems to be the forecast. We see them also again tomorrow on Saturday coming out of the Four Corner States into the western and high plains. And on Sunday, there is a boundary sneaking through the Red River Valley of the North we're going to watch here in the high-res models. So let's get right to it. This is today's NAM forecast. I think it was halfway decently initialized this morning. As we play this forward, let's get into this afternoon, this evening. Look at the size of that low, spreading all this rain at times over parts of the Pacific Northwest. We'll watch tonight again for these larger storms, as was denoted by the Storm Prediction Center, while the front stalls off of the southeast coast. We then play forward into Saturday morning, Saturday midday, and Saturday evening. You saw a couple of chances of rain running the ridge, but by the time we get into Saturday evening, we're going to keep an eye on those storms kind of moving out as the deeper trough pushes more of that flow into Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and starts to pull these storms a bit farther to the east. And that gets us up to Sunday. This will be the day where on the evening of Sunday, we need to watch this section of the country. The high-res NAM at this point only runs out to 1 o'clock on Sunday. It's a 60-hour forecast model. But you'll have access to all of these on my new website, so you can do that. Plus, you can zoom into regions. That'll be a nice feature of this. You're like, I really want to look at the Pacific Northwest. Well, you can come in there and now start to see the higher resolution data. I'm pretty excited to be able to deliver that to you. But from here, I want to show you this pattern. We've had this deeper trough of low pressure that's been living off the west coast. It's what sparked all of the precipitation this week, the stronger winds. There's our Texas ridge. There's our system leaving the northeast. And as we play this forward, we're going to watch that wave eject out of the northwest. So it's going to come out right here and rip across this area by next Tuesday. At that same point, we have a ridge spreading farther to the east. That's going to bring the heat with it this weekend and early next week. And as we talked about, sneaking around on the back side of this, there is this weaker low pressure that's moving into Texas, increasing the rainfall chances, which we'll now see much better in the models. But we're out here on the Tuesday playing forward. And what we're going to be watching for the central U.S. is this trough that kind of sneaks across here. The ensembles have it, the operational runs have it, the artificial intelligence has it. And that's going to bring in a shot at some cooler air into this area and the chance for more rain. And we're going to watch out for that as it goes right over the top of some of those same places that have been hit quite a bit with rain this year. Now, from yesterday, what are we watching? We know that we have to keep a close eye on any sort of big ridging event in Alaska or just heat building in the west coast because that'll drop temperatures east. And while I don't see big ridges building into Alaska, we do see in the forecast models, a relatively amplified pattern, which means this is going to be a cool down that'll come through here and move across the northeast as we look out there to like September 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. But behind it, we have another surge of warmer air. And guess where this next trough is diving? Coming back to where it has been in the Pacific Northwest. Now, I've got big questions about this, and we're going to talk about this again in a few moments because that would be an interesting pattern setup for the month of September, which I've confessed to you I've had a difficult time forecasting and trying to pick up on the right signals to tell you where it's going. But from this, I do want to go right into our model analysis. This is the 12Z WPC forecast. So the Weather Prediction Center, this was the model run this morning. That's what all that means. And it's a 7-day forecast. And what I want to point out is the increase in chances of rain here, largely from that trough coming through next week. We still have this. We still have the deep low running up. We have the stalled out boundary and better moisture trying to push into Texas with this pattern. And it continues to stay wet in parts of the Canadian prairie, specifically Manitoba. From here, let's go look at the NBM. Now, this is the 0Z run. I'm still waiting on the 12Z run to finish. So that's what you're looking at here. 7-day, 10 days. So see how it's also picking up on that rain mid to late week next week in the Midwest. It's also got the frontal boundary stalling, but better chances of moisture into Texas, and all the other pieces we've been talking about are in place here too. From there, what about the AI model? This is the 7-day artificial intelligence forecast from the 0Z run. Here is the 10-day. And the AI model, like several models, is trying to open up better chances for just rain in a broad section of the country while still keeping the same pieces we've been talking about in place, right? But this is what's of interest to me, only because of how dry and hot it has been in this area. to see these models continue to try to pull something around. I don't think it's going to be tropical in nature, but it's going to have tropical moisture in it into Texas, delivering some moisture. It's not just there in the AI model, it's also there in the ECMWF, 7-day to 10-day. See that? 7-day to 10-day. 7 to 10. And the GFS just wants to give rain to everybody by day 10. Look at that, just not everybody, but a whole lot of a broader area. It seems to be a very wet model when we look out there. What I can tell you is that when you look at the probabilities, they keep shrinking for this large area that had been forecast very dry. Now we start to see it pull back, right? So the new 10-day outlook for the chance of staying under 1/10 of an inch is now less. All right. If we step this up to 1/2 inch, darn it, just got the new run in. As soon as we go past daylight saving time, that won't happen anymore. But anyway, you've got 240 hour. This is the chance it's staying under 1/2 inch. So this is still relatively high in these values. So we're 50-60% chance, but it's not as bone dry as forecast earlier. And on the wetter side of this, who's got the best chance at over 1 inch? There you go. This is what's increased in this area. And that region right down there has increased as well. Now, this part of Texas has been on a roller coaster in terms of precipitation and temperatures. You remember back in spring, how wet it was? Then it was hit by Beryl. And then after that, we've just shut the rain off in this area. And now we're bringing it back on again. So this part of Texas has been just something I've been watching quite a bit of as of late. From here, let me take you out and show you the week 2 models. Now, I do have something I think it's quite important to share with you about this. You know, I don't ever tell you about the GFS ensemble. I dismiss it. And one of the big reasons for that is it's had some very strange behavior, I think, in some of the data sets I used to make this. So when I compared the GFS output, I had been historically comparing it to another data set versus the one I do for the European model. So the CPC and the European, if you've watched my videos, they often line up a bit better, and the GFS is an outlier. So you can even see that now, although I imagine the CPC will start to eliminate this given some of the new model data. Well, I've been rewriting a lot of this code and working on it better, and I want to show you. This is what the new GFS forecasts are going to start to look like. Now you see that big southeast dry bias that's always been there. I think that was because of the climatology data set I was comparing it to. And that was where the bias was. So I switched it over to compare to the ERA 5 data set, and now we start to see more consistent behavior. So that's the, this is the forecast from the GFS. And here is the European model. So now we can look at them kind of side by side, same projection. And the week 2 outlook shows a lot of similarities now. I like that. That makes me happy that I found that bug and got it fixed. And this will all be going on the new website for you very soon. Okay, let's get over and talk about temperatures next. We've been mentioning this heat opening up. Still extremely hot in Texas today. The heat builds in the northern plains up in the Canadian prairie. The west is very cold. I mean, to see high temperatures here trying to get out of the 80s, out of the 70s. Watch the heat on Saturday into Sunday. This is, again, the day we're going to be watching for 100-degree temperatures here in the western Cornbelt. We go into Monday, the heat's still moving in. The northern plains, of course, need more longer duration heat. But by the time we get to next Wednesday, as that hot air moves into the southeast, another deep trough starts to work its way through. And that's the one that's initiating the better chances for storms in this area, but bringing in some cooler air behind it. The day 5 through 10 is reflecting that. You see the cooler pattern here, the heat moving into the southeast, the warmth returning to the west. And you all know that we're watching very carefully for West Coast heat going forward in the month of September. Because we talked about this yesterday. The more we bring in heat here, the jet stream has to go over this and it dives into this area, dropping temperatures. Now, I looked at every metric I know to look at to know if we should be concerned about this temperature change day 10 through 15. It's right here. Is that going to be enough to maybe initiate some cooler conditions that could drop us back into the 40s, maybe 30s? Now, this is out there the first week of September, so this is like the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. I did not see evidence of that yet, but when we get cooler conditions showing up in the models at this time with such heat west, we do need to be on the lookout for it. So again, that's not me causing panic or raising the alarm bells yet. I just want you to know we have some cooler air coming in, and it's the right time of year to be watching out for the potential for some very early frost. Don't see it yet, but I want to keep you aware of it. All right. Okay, as we start to wrap this one up, here's one of the things that's a bit perplexing to me. That heat that's coming into the west is a part of this. So the PNA is negative now. That's the deep trough that's along the west coast. We know that it builds up into early next week, and then there's another trough that comes in. Remember, I showed you that. But as you get out there into the month of September, do we really see more western U.S. ridging? Because the control run wants to keep bringing it back. And if it keeps bringing it back, that's actually going to not allow for a lot of very warm conditions in the month of September or even into early October to kind of exist in the eastern half of the country centered around the Great Lakes. So I show you all of that, and I want to remind you at the same time, the blues that you see in here represent stronger trade winds as of late. We've repositioned the MJO. It had spent so much of the early part of the month here near Africa, and now it's over north of Australia and Indonesia. So we've had strengthening trade winds. We've had a very widely varying jet stream pattern across the western United States. And the MJO is flipped around. So all of this means that some of the ideas we've been painting this summer about the way the pattern has been are going to start to fall apart a bit. And on top of that, we're going to be watching typhoons, eventually more hurricanes, a surge in La Nina most likely at some point, given those trade winds. And that's why I think predictability is low. I can't figure out how to constructively add or subtract these things to tell you where it's going to go. And the models want to flip-flop every day. So for example, the new week 3, week 4 outlook from the CFSV2 is drier and drier. There it is, the 13th to the 19th, drier and drier. Now it's not going to be able to pick up on tropical development, but that's what it's got forecast. Temperature-wise, see the coolness it's leaving in this area? It's trying to keep a lot of it in the west. And that's what's got me concerned about, September being, on the riskier side of cool. Now, I show you that, and at the same time, I say, well, what about the European model? Is it showing something similar? And the European long range, okay, again, it really whiffed on the pressure pattern here. I've brought that up several times. Maybe I'll finally shut up about it now. But when you look at its precip patterns for the 30 days ending in September, it actually goes back over a bit wetter in this area, drier farther to the south, and more active tropical systems down here. But the temperature pattern is still, in the model, just mild. And it's just been over-predicting temperatures for a while, and therefore I just think we're going to have to watch it and just go week by week still until I can see how these pieces are kind of adding up or detracting from one another. I'm not quite sure just yet. So we'll keep building those ideas over the weekend as I rebuild the website. All right, I want to finish up with one last thing, and that is South America. Now, to be honest, if we keep the high pressure here, and we get flow coming around like this is actually a really good monsoonal type flow. The only difference would be if we could get these winds to come a bit more from this direction to tap into more of the humid air along the equator. But I bring this up because this is the type of thing we would expect to start to see this time of year. On top of that, we have a cold front that's come through here. It's meeting this flow, so right in the middle is where there's a boundary, and that's where the heaviest rains are located. So to show you, there is the cold air advancing farther to the north over the next 5 days. And if you look at the precip pattern, I don't know, you can look at any of these you want, we can see here that we've got plenty of wet weather in southern Brazil. And the monsoon is not yet here, but the surge in the wind behavior, the trade winds are on the northern side of it, is indicative of a monsoon trying to get itself together. So I want to show you one last thing, and that is a 30-day sliding window from now till September 21st. But as I move this forward, it's just going to drop off one day and add another. As we go out there to the end of September and the beginning of October, we are starting to see signs of life of the monsoon showing up. And if it's already going by the end of September and the beginning of October, that will be an early plant signal, not a late plant signal, but an early plant signal for a lot of Brazil. So I'm going to stop there and just say thank you for hanging on with me again this week. I look forward to giving you an updated website very soon. We'll see if I can get that done this weekend. Got soccer tournaments, though, and got this festival to go to. My parents are coming over, so I can't wait to see them. So I don't know. We'll hopefully get it done. But you all have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.